Hello, dear children. Welcome to the second class of Anniversaries of War. Today we are starting with the poem Anniversaries of War. Anniversaries of War. So the poet is remembering about many wars which was fought in the place we are going to study with, Tel Gath. And we could see that poet is with children in Tel Gath, and we could see an optimistic note of life over death in the end of the poem, and the poet is with his children in the mound of Tel Gath. Let's dive into the poem. Tel Gath, I brought my children to the mound, where once I fought battles, so they would understand the things I did do and forgive me for the things I didn't do. The distance between my striding legs and my head grows bigger and I grow smaller. Those days grow away from me. These times grow away from me too. And I am in the middle without them on this mound with my children. A light afternoon wind blows, but only a few people move in the blowing wind. Bend down a little with the grass and the flowers, dandelions cover the mound. You could say, as dandelions in multitude. I brought my children to the mound, and we sat there. On its back and its side, as in the poem by Shmuel Ha-Nagid in Spain. Like me, a man of hills and a man of wars, who sang a lullaby to his soldiers before the battle. Yet I did not talk to my heart as he did, but to my children, to the mound. We wear the resurrection, fleeting like this springtime, eternal like it too. The poem is about the narrator's visit to Tel Gath. Tel Gath is considered to be the birthplace of Goliath. It got biblical echoes. Goliath was a giant who fought against David. The story goes like this. Saul and his Israelites were facing the Philistines in the valley of Elah. Twice a day, morning and evening, for 40 days, Goliath, the champion of the Philistines, comes out between the lines and challenges the Israelites. What was his challenge? He challenged to send a champion of their own from Israel for a single combat with this giant man, Goliath. He challenged for a face-to-face single combat. But Saul was afraid. But David accepted the challenge. He trusted in God. And he trusted that God will come and save him. Saul reluctantly agrees and he offers his armor. But David declines that. He took only his staff, sling, and 5 stones. David and Goliath confront each other. Fight. Goliath with his armor and javelin, David with his staff and sling. Philistine cursed David by his gods. But David replies, "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down, and I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that God saves not with the sword and spear. For the battle is God's, and he'll give you into our hand." David hurls a stone from his sling and hits Goliath in the center of his forehead. Goliath falls on his face to the ground. David cuts off his head. David won in the single combat. Israel won the battle. So this poem, this place has a significance from the early centuries. From BC onwards, this place has got its significance. Tel means a site which is made up of many layers, and in each layer, it may be representing a different phase of the history of the site. The site was witnessed a lot of battles. Tel Gath is also historically very much important because it had an Arab settlement, and the settlement was abandoned during the Israelis' War of Independence. The place offers the poet to discuss different layers of history and different wars at various points of time in history. The place was also famous for its wine presses, and certain archaeologists says that Tel Gath is Tel e Safi, which means white mount. You can see in the picture. Since there are lots of white chalky cliffs near Gath, the place carries biblical echoes. We saw the story of David and Goliath. The title is suggestive of the anniversaries of war that goes beyond the ones that the narrator fought. Narrator fought in a war, but there were a lot of wars that took place between these countries. It was fought in the Middle Ages too. Wars in the Middle Ages too. Gath, often referred to as the Gath of Philistines, was one of the 5 Philistine city-states. Gath is often mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, and the existence of this place is confirmed by Egyptian inscriptions too. Tel Gath, I brought my children to the mount. So he took his children to the mounts in Tel Gath. He brought his children there, and that was the place where once I fought battles. He was a soldier. He took part in several wars. We have seen in his introduction, and he fought many battles. And that place was where he fought. So they would understand the things I did do and forgive me for the things I didn't do. In the battlefield, a person is remembered for the things he did and things he didn't do. Nothing more than that. So he brought his children there. So they would definitely understand the things he did and forgive their father for the things he didn't do in the battlefield. He remembers this place, the place of battles. So it will make his children understand that how important was his contribution to the country, for serving the country. How important is his contribution in the war. And definitely he asks his children to forgive for what he didn't do in the war. In the poem you can see, it exploits the passage of time both forward and backward. He is with the children, but he is thinking about the war times also. The day moves forward and the poet moves backward in time, thinking about the war time. The distance between my striding legs and my head grows bigger and I grow smaller. Those days grow away from me. These times grow away from me too. And I am in the middle without them on this mount with my children. In this paragraph we can see he realizes he is getting old. The distance between my striding legs and my head grows bigger. Maybe it talks about his fading memory also. And I grow smaller is he became an old man. Those days grow away from me is maybe his memories are fading from him. His war memories, the war time with his other fellow soldiers. Those days were far behind him now. These times grow away from me too. The present moment with his children, these times will grow away from me too. That means it is the passage of time. This time will also go away, and maybe he will also walk towards death. And I am in the middle. Now he's thinking about his wartime again, and I am in the middle in the mound. Without them, without his fellow soldiers who accompanied him in the battle, I am in the middle without them on this mound with my children. Earlier, I was here with the soldiers in the nationalistic spirit, full spirit of nationalism. I fought here with the other soldiers. But now he's saying that he's with his children in the mound without the accompaniment of his fellow soldiers. The poem exploits the passage of time both forwards and backwards. He realizes that he's getting older. He's not strong mentally and physically. The times are growing away from him. He experienced a lot of painful moments in war. Wars are not just of pleasant memories, they are just of painful memories too. Memories are fading away from him as he's getting older. He's getting close towards his death. He's getting older. In the next paragraph, you can see the reference to the nature also. A light afternoon wind blows, but only a few people move in the blowing wind. Bend down a little with the grass and the flowers. Dandelions cover the mound, you could say, as dandelions and multitude. A light afternoon wind blows refers to the passage of time, the days moving ahead. But only a few people move in the blowing wind. That refers to only a few people could endure the struggles of life. They bend down a little, but they rise again. A few people could only move with the changing times. Maybe this is an advice to the children also to be so strong. A few people move in the blowing wind, bend down a little with the grass and the flowers. Dandelions cover the mound, and he is referred to dandelion. Dandelion flower, they could endure many harsh conditions of the weather. And also, it means dandelion blowing in the wind represents the wish for a good fate. Maybe represents a wish for a good fate of children and for the country. And the dandelions could also stand as a memorial for a loved one that has passed away. And in Tel Gath, we know many wars been fought. Many soldiers lost their lives. These dandelions are also there as a memorial for the loved one, for the soldiers who was very much close to his hearts. So here he's saying that people move in the blowing wind. They just bend down a little, but they rise again. People need to rise again. Dandelions cover the mound. In the whole mound, you could see a lot of dandelions. The mound of Tel Gath, where he is visiting now with his children. And you could say as dandelions and multitude. You can see a lot of dandelions there. Maybe it is representing the soldiers also. Dandelions cover the mound. A lot of soldiers, you could say dandelions and multitude. A lot of soldiers were fighting then along with him. And now it is also can be referred as the soldiers who lost their lives in that sight. They were in multitude. I hope you understood this. A light afternoon wind blows, but only a few people move in the blowing wind. Bend down a little with the grass and the flowers. Dandelions cover the mound. You could say as dandelions and multitude. Lot of soldiers in the war side, and many people lost their lives in that mound in Tel Gath. Millions of people lost their lives because the Israel conflict started from BC onwards, and many people lost their lives. In Middle Ages, many soldiers lost their lives. And in the 20th century also, wars were continuing, people lost their lives. And still now, we could hear in the news channels the wars that are fought there. So only few people could face the struggles. They could endure, they could move along with the changing times. Dandelions cover the mound. A lot of soldiers lost their lives in the mound, and they were in multitude. So we can say dandelion is a metaphor used for soldiers. I brought my children to the mound, and we sat there on its back and its side, as in the poem by Shmuel Ha-Nagid in Spain. Like me, a man of hills and a man of wars, who sang a lullaby to his soldiers before the battle. And now he thinks of the battles in the past, is again moving backwards, and makes him recall a line from a poem. He is recalling the line on its back and its side. And the poem by Samuel bin Nagrullah, a Jewish poet, Shmuel Ha-Nagid, lived in 993 to 1056 AD. He was a Jewish poet. And he is one of the most important Jewish poets of the Middle Age. He was a soldier, and he was a statesman, and he wrote poems while he was on battlefield. He wrote poems about soldiers, their experiences in the battlefield, so that the soldiers don't feel their dejection. It showed his interest in nationalism. He encouraged the soldiers. And he was a reputed scholar of Talmud. Talmud that contains the history of the Jewish religion as well as their laws and beliefs. It is the basic tool for learning the ethics behind the customs of their religion. And the Talmud developed in two major centers of Jewish scholarship, Babylonia and Palestine. He was a reputed scholar of the Talmud, and he fought in Spain. And he also headed the Arab army for nearly 2 decades. So the poet is reminding about this another poet. I brought my children to the mount, and he, the poet himself, sat there on the mount, and he's recalling the line from the Jewish poet, on its back and its side, on the mountains, on the mountain they are sitting, recalling the line from the poet. Like me, a comparison between Amichai and the Jewish poet. Like me, a man of hills and a man of war. So he's also a soldier. He was also a soldier, and who sang a lullaby to his soldiers before the battle. He was also speaking, he was speaking to the soldiers. That's why who sang a lullaby to his soldiers before the battle. Who was speaking to the soldiers, and it relieved soldiers a lot. They were in the battlefield, so that through the poems they don't feel dejection. Therefore, they don't feel dejected anymore. Arousing their interest in nationalism, it encouraged the soldiers. Like me, a man of hills and a man of wars. So he has used a simile. Like has been used here. Simile, figure of speech, like. figure of speech simile is used here. Yet I did not talk to my heart as he did. The ancient Jewish poet, the Israeli poet, he talked from his heart to the soldiers. He addressed the soldiers. But Amichai was talking towards his children. And that was his greatness. That was the old poet's greatness. He was talking from his heart to the soldiers in the battlefield. It encouraged the soldiers. But to my children, he spoke. Amichai spoke to his children. Now we are coming towards the last line. To the mount we wear the resurrection, fleeting like the springtime, eternal like it too. To the mount, to the Tel Gath, to the mount, we wear the resurrection. Poet is a resurrection. The old poet, he's also getting reminded here. His words are also resurrected. We wear the resurrection, and fleeting like the springtime, but the life is fleeting like this springtime. Spring, why it is season spring? Because we mentioned about light breeze and dandelions, the blooming of dandelions, symbol of springtime, arrival of springtime. And he says that the life fleets like the springtime. The poet, his children, everybody fleets like the springtime. This season will also come to an end, but it is for a time being only. It will be resurrected soon. The changing of seasons. The spring season will come again in the next year. The changing of time, changing of spring seasons. Life is fleeting like the springtime, eternal like it too. But as spring is eternal because it is not getting to an end. It is renewed and it would come in the next time. And life is also like that. We cannot say death is the ultimate end of the life because it is also the beginning of new life. A new life is also, persons keep on changing, but the life on earth, it sustains. Life continues, right? Life continues. He was writing after the wars and all, and he knows even the wars were happening from the old ages. The Israel conflict was happening from the old ages and it was continuing. But people were changing, life was sustaining. Life is also like fleeting like springtime, but it is eternal. Eternal like it too. Mount is eternal. Mount is there, right? And it will keep on be like that, the place, the witness of many wars, witness of many centuries, like that. Yes, so we come towards the end of this poem. The poem ends on an assertion of life over death. It ends in an optimistic note, right? Even though it is speaking about the war memories, it ends on an assertion of life, eternal life over death, in the image of narrator and his children. The poem suggests that life is both fleeting and eternal. The life continues, the people changes, life is eternal. He is assessing his past acts in the work. Death doesn't put an end to the life. There is always regeneration of life happens. And he is there as the representative of the soldiers, resurrected. And resurrection, it also has a religious reference, resurrection, right? Christ got resurrected, religious reference too. Life fleeting, life like springtime, like is used, simile, figure of speech, simile is used here. But it is eternal too, fleeting and eternal. Life is like that. And the poem ends in an optimistic note. I hope you got an overall idea about the poem. So we will meet in our next class. Happy learning.